Testing. Hey YouTube. Um, I Hey Daryl Deemer and Island Queen. How's the sound? Sound check. Hey Laura. Hey Nisi. Yes, guys, I'm back. Um, I hang on. Let me do some housekeeping. I'm going to start doing a new set of streams. Welcome to the Stream Race Fish Room. I'm amazed to see all you guys here. I have, thanks Kaler's Aquatics. I have been gone for a little over a month. Gone from YouTube. Eight Cobwebs Caverns. Welcome to the stream. We have had just a horrendous Christmas and January this year, and I just decided that I needed to take some time off. We lost Phil, which most of you probably know. That's my wife's oldest son. And then about a month and a half later, his young wife died. She had COPD and she died of a heart attack in her sleep. And we had just gone through moving Phil's stuff to her apartment and getting her set up. And we're getting into this, we went through Phil's funeral and we were getting into the swing of how the new things were and trying to help Kelly through Phil's loss. And then she died. And so her funeral is in a couple of days, and it's just been really rough. And then there's a lot of collateral stuff involved with people dying and their houses and all their things and moving them all around and dealing with them. Yeah, Laura, it is rough. She died of a heart attack in her sleep. So I guess if you've got to go, that's the way to go. Then here about a week ago, our boxer pit bull mix had a stroke and lost control of his body, and we had to put him down. So it's just really been a brutal stretch for us as far as death, funerals, moving households. Yeah, Petey, Island Queen. So, hey Joel, welcome to the stream. So basically I've just been overwhelmed with all of it and trying to help my wife and trying to come to terms with all these losses. ATM Aquatics, welcome to the stream. I am calling this new stream 1. I'm doing away with the Bob Show, which was on like 93 or 94, and I'm not sure what I'm going to call this set of streams. Kaler, it's touch and go, tell you the honest truth. We've had so much loss so quickly that it's just been hard to cope with all of it, and we've just been kind of rolling with the punches. Yes, Joel, new beginnings, new show. I've noticed, that's what I told my wife when Phil died, that this stuff comes in threes, and that's a very old saying, but very often it turns out to be true, and we've had our three: Phil, Kelly, and Petey. I've noticed. Well, Bob Kaler, I'm glad to see you with a new year and a new name. I have noticed that Mark's shrimp tanks has been running his live stream at like 4-ish, 4:15, 4:20. And so that was basically, I was starting about 3:45 with the Bob Show, because I always have to check and make sure there's not some new download with XSplit. And hey Susan, you'll have to rewind to hear about all the stuff that's gone on, but suffice it to say that it's been a rough couple of months for the Kitchel household, and we're just kind of recovering, hoping for spring, hoping for a new start here, kind of deal with all the grieving. I have been trying to keep up as much as I could. Thank you, Candy. I know you're no stranger to unhappy turns of events, and I hope things get better for you and your son too. I have been trying to keep up with people's streams and stuff. Susan, I've been remiss in making many of your streams. I come on and I see that you were just on, so I've been missing yours a lot. I've tried to keep my hand in. I've tried to comment as much as I felt I could. It's thank you, Susan. It's been rough. I'll just put it like that. So, I just felt like the smartest thing for me to do was to take a month off and just, try to recharge the batteries, process some of the grief, and try to start thinking about moving on. One of the things that I would really like to do with these live streams is to, I've been casting about for topics. I basically come on and say I have no axe to grind today, and I hope that you guys give me questions or start talking about a topic that piques my interest. Hey, Phil Emerson, welcome to the stream. One of the things that I want desperately to do with this YouTube presence that I have, and I've lost a lot of subscribers because I've been missing for so long, and I can't blame them. They're just not seeing me around anymore, so they may think that I've fallen off the edge of the world or something, but that's not the case. It's just been a lot of grief to process and deal with, and a lot of moving household stuff, dealing with death certificates and funerals, and while my wife has done the majority of that, I have been trying to support her as much as possible, trying to make it palatable for her to deal with the stuff that she's had to deal with. And it's hey, Corona Ken, welcome to the stream, man. I appreciate your back channel letters, Ken and Nisi, and all of you that have written me and talked to me on Facebook and given me well wishes and offered help. Cobweb Caverns, my understanding is that the Kitchels that I'm related to go back to the Venerable Bede in England. So while Scottish origin is not impossible for the Kitchel family, my father has done a lot of genealogy work and tracked it back, and they stopped at the Venerable Bede. We have some kind of connection with Bede, and that's basically where they stopped it at, or didn't try to go much further, or couldn't find record. Yeah, And I never really try to do much with that. I know that there are. I live in Indiana now, and I've been living here for 20 something years. I met my wife online and moved up here to get to know her, and we ended up getting married, and I ended up living here. I had been living at Dallas at the time, and there are more Kitchels in the state of Indiana than any place I've ever seen before. So I don't know whether that's Scottish or whether that's, um, thank you, Island Queen. So anyway, one of the things that I'd really like to do with this live stream and my presence on YouTube is to try to make it. Nisi says your circle of people will always be there for you and your family. I hope you know that. I'm sorry for your losses and the heartbreak that comes with that. If you need anything, you know we'll help. Nisi, I can't even describe to you how wonderful that sounds, how wonderful that feels, how wonderful it was to get your messages on Facebook, and just knowing that there are people out there that care. Um, I don't know that you could take any other hobby that I'm aware of and throw a dart at it and hit more wonderful people um, than with fish keeping. Fish keeping just seems to be the type of hobby that appeals to people that have compassion and empathy. I'm very much generalizing here, so don't anybody take me to task for it. But it has been my experience that the great many people in fish keeping are just generally good people, and it is such a comfort to have people reach out, to have people show just how good they are inside when something like this happens and you go through a really yeah. And Joel says, yeah, I've said this before, you tend to weed out the worst people when caring for animals is involved. Credit where credit's due, Terry's Tropical Tanks. Um, that doesn't mean that there aren't egos involved in the fish keeping hobby. That doesn't mean that there are not terrible people in the fish keeping hobby. There are, and I've met many of them and dealt with many of them. And you just have to take the good with the bad. But my experience has been over the years that there is way more good. If you go to a convention, a fish keeping convention, or some kind of big fish keeping event, you will run into so many people that are just amazing and wonderful, and it's just overwhelming how good the preponderance of people in the fish keeping hobby are. And I can't think of a much better way to talk to people that are new to the hobby and say, look, that this hobby can be expensive. It doesn't have to be, but it can be expensive depending on which direction you go. This hobby has many issues with the wild caught fish that we're all so accustomed to for the past 40 or 50 years that I'm aware of. Suddenly they're starting to die off in the wild, and unless they're kept alive by hobbyists and fish dealers, we're probably not going to have a lot of them anymore, because we won't be able to get them from the wild anymore because their habitat's gone, and unless someone's keeping them alive, they won't be available. So There are some downsides to this hobby. Um, it can be heart-wrenching when you lose a great deal of fish suddenly to some malady, to some of the dark holes that are out there in the fish keeping hobby. You know, Mycobacterium, Columnaris. There's a lot of different kinds of diseases that can become involved with fish that can make it really heart-wrenching to lose a great bunch of them. But by and large, the fish keeping hobby is an incredibly welcoming and incredibly there's an incredible amount of camaraderie among fish keepers because they have gone through the same thing. Hey Pam, welcome to the stream. It's good to see you in here. Wow, I've got 18 people watching by my count. That's more than I usually get. Anyway, I am going to start doing my streams more like 2:45 on Saturday afternoon, my time, Eastern, to avoid overlapping with Mark Shrimp Tanks because I've seen that he has been doing his live streams while I was still on, and I don't want to step on anyone else's toes. I'd much rather it be a everybody can go watch him when he's on too. Well, Cobweb Caverns, that's really great, and I appreciate it to no end. So, I keep trying to get to this. I would like to do a series of live streams that deal with rank amateurs. People who, for Christmas, were given a fish tank and they didn't know exactly how to deal with it. And I'd like to go through some of my experience, some tips. Well, Candy, I appreciate that to no end, and I'm thankful that you guys were worried about me, and I'm sorry that I caused you to worry, but we've just been through a rough patch, and all in all, I just was kind of drained, and I just felt the need to take some time off, to not be attached to YouTube quite as closely as I was. But I very much would like to do a series of live streams, and that's why I'm calling this new stream and starting it back at #1. It's a new year, it's a new start for me, and I want to try to lean in on people that are new to the hobby. You guys have a wealth of information in your experience, and I would like to tap into that and try to give people that are new to the hobby as many tips, as many anecdotal pull-ups by the bootstraps as we can. I'm going to basically start with a 10-gallon tank and start talking about, I've named my channel Water because my basic feeling about fish keeping is that we take care of the water and the fish take care of themselves. Of course we feed them, of course we medicate them, of course we watch them, but basically what we do as fish keepers is take care of the water. And depending on how good of a job we do taking care of the water, will have a great deal to do with how our fish thrive. And a lot of that is research, understanding what our fish require, understanding, hey V-Stag, welcome to the stream, man. I've missed all you guys. Understanding what kind of fish we are trying to put in what kind of water and what those fish require as far as water qualities and water requirements. So I think I can probably do 4 or 5 live streams just talking about water to new people in the hobby, how they can go about learning to understand the the nitrogen cycle that occurs in our fish tanks, how they can figure out how to break down the science that's involved in manageable bites and try to add that to their arsenal in the sense of recognizing what's going on. I mean, all of us have heard the stories, and many of us have done going out, buying a fish tank dry, looking at fish, wanting to buy a fish and saying, I want that fish, and then buying the tank, and then buying the water. I mean, buying the chemicals and the filtration, and going home and pouring all these things into the tank and setting up our little filters. Fluval Q1s are pretty good air pumps, Corona Ken. I've been enjoying your back channel talking about how things have been going for you. I'm quite jealous of your plant keeping abilities that you have developed, and that's another thing that I think should be covered heavily. So when I'm doing those I think that basically it needs to be broken down into water, filtration, substrate, and fish. And I can envision 20 or 30 live streams covering those topics. I know I can do 4 or 5 easy with water, and if you guys pitch in and help, that will make it even more wholesome for people to see other people's experience, to use their anecdotal information to see if it will work for them, because we all do fish keeping differently. We've all been trained, we've all been mentored, we've all learned from different books, different people, different live streams, different methodologies, different countries. We all have a shared base of knowledge in that a great deal of our learning overlaps one another. But that doesn't mean that we don't do things in very different ways. And I think that it is fundamental to explain to people that are new to the hobby how it is possible to do it in so many different ways, and what kind of skill level do you need to have developed to be able to do it in such a different way. You know, if a newbie was watching excuse me, if a rank noob was watching Lucas and took Lucas's filtration method, which, as most of us know, is basically nature, plants, and substrate, and maybe an air stone, or maybe not an air stone, and saw that as the only way to use filtration in a tank, they would have a really difficult time, because the tank would not be mature, the tank would not be fully developed with its plant life, And it could really kill their fish to dump a whole bunch of fish in a tank that they just planted and just put substrate in. So I would really like to do an extensive version of talking to people that are new to the hobby, that need to learn, that need to uh, understand what's required to be able to get on their feet as far as making their fish thrive. And I think I'll start that next week with water. And I will go through some of the anecdotal information that I have, what I felt like I went through when I first learned about water. And we'll go from there. And hopefully enough of you guys are around or watch later on and can add. I mean, heaven knows that I am not perfect. I will make mistakes. I will give bad advice right along with the good advice, because it's bad advice that I've been following for years and years and years. And I will expect for you guys to help me out by correcting me where you think I'm wrong, by stating the facts as you see them. And we will give new aquarists a variety of knowledge base things, tips, experiences, so that they can pick and choose what works for them and try to go from there. You know, see how it works for them, see what the difference is in their fish by taking what knowledge we can offer to them. And I'd like to spend about 20 weeks doing this. So that's what this new stream is all going to be about. And I will try to study up. I will try to stay abreast of what's new and try to add that to my basic old school experience and knowledge. And I hope that you guys will help me too. And we'll also continue to deal with your questions and your topics. I think that there is room for that. I think that we can do both, and that people that want to learn, that have gone out and bought that new tank and put all those fish that they decided that they had to have in that tank and then watch them die, we will get... Yep, Phil Emerson says he just did a water change on his 40, the whole time thinking it wasn't dirty. It is so much better now. Yeah, there's two strains of thought on that. One is that a dirty tank offers fry and many of the denizens in your tank stuff that they can eat off of. And the other line of thinking is that unless you're doing a 50% water change once or twice a week, you're not doing enough water change. And the truth is somewhere in between that. I don't think... Thank you, Susan. Thank you so much for dropping by. Hey, Joseph, how's it going, man? Hola. Hola, amigo. In my terrible Spanish. These guys, when we were in Peru, they would basically put their hands over my mouth when I would start trying to speak Spanish because I butchered it so badly. I understand a great deal of Spanish because I've lived around Hispanics in Texas for a lot of years and rented to them and had to learn enough to be able to communicate with them. But my Spanish was not very good in Peru. I tried. I gave it my best shot. But Joseph knows how to speak Spanish very well, and so it was a joke to him when I started speaking Spanish. Joseph, how are your blue tetras doing? I have not kept up with your channel for the last month, I'm sorry to say. I think I watched one of your videos. I have so many blue tetra fry. They are breeding, rearing as a colony. The adults are not eating the fry. Oh my gosh. Do you have overhanging plants in the tank? It's my understanding that that variety, and the name's gone out of my head already, that variety of tetras requires overhanging plants to lay their eggs. Something tells me that perhaps that's not true. Huh? If I don't remember there being a lot of overhanging plants in your tank. I'm so jealous, Joseph. I hope you know that. I'm jealous of both you and Dean having such incredible luck. And it's not incredible luck. It's as much skill and effort as it is luck, but it's still luck. Cobweb Cavern says, I think if you are breeding, you can change water too much sometimes. Consistency in water parameters is the most important thing, and I would agree with that wholeheartedly. I think there are a lot of people that can do 20% a week and do just fine, but I think that doing 20% a week, or some people go 2 weeks, can put you in a situation where you're slowly building up detritus and nitrates and nitrites in that tank, and your fish adjust to it. It looks like they're doing just fine, but we need to be most of the really old school people would tell you to change 50% a week, if not twice a week. And while I don't follow that, I recognize it. I think it's true. I also think that if your tank's so clean that you could eat dinner off of it if you drain the water out of it, that your fish need a certain amount of living organisms in the tank, and those organisms live off of detritus and algae and various other things, and that those need to accumulate somewhat. I don't know how you can have a mature tank that is so clean that there's nothing else in it besides the substrate and the decorations and the plants and the fish. 10 gallons, hornwort and duckweed on top. Lots of leaf litter, tannins, and only a sponge filter. 50 ppm TDS and 20% water change weekly. Feeding live BBS and 3 different live worms. There's where the breeding is happening. It's the tannins, because those fish came out of heavily tannined water. Although where we were catching most of the blue tetras, I must have caught 40 of them. And as you guys can see in all the videos, I was incapable of walking up and down like those guys were. I couldn't stay on the rocks. My back was killing me. And I was catching them from the bank. And it was a deep hole with really green water. And it was gorgeous. I think back to that, and I could go back to that creek. Only this time, if I went back, I'd have my camera out and I'd get some pictures of the blue butterflies. Hornwort and duckweed. Well, maybe they're laying on the duckweed. Duckweed's an overhanging plant. It qualifies. So maybe that's what it is. But it's all that live food that you're feeding that's probably setting off the breeding like crazy. You should probably starve them a little, Joseph. Not the fry. The fry need to eat regular when they're fry, but you should probably starve the adults a little bit. I've had to cut back on feeding mine. My Imperials have gotten so large. They're like 3 inches long, and they look like they weigh an ounce each now. So they've gotten so big and fat from having regular food given to them that I've started to feed every other day. Sometimes I forget and feed every day, but I've started trying to feed them a little bit less and feed them every other day. And for those that don't know, that watched my video about me getting the same tetras that Joseph is getting breeding out of, I lost all of mine but one. I had about 17, 16 survived the shipping, and I lost all of them but one. There's one tiny one left in that tank. And that fish seems to be doing wonderfully, which makes me wonder why all the others died, what it was, and what I've pretty much come down to deciding is that fish is not the same as the other blue tetras. That is the other, oh gosh, Titicharox species that Joseph was describing that he got some of in his tank, in his shipment. Ah, you're right, Joseph. They might. Are you planning to remove the fry or planning to remove the adults? I know you're short on tank space, but if you remove the adults, Joseph's got it right there. Madeirae is what he's recognized it as. Titiocharex madeirae. And I think that is the single one that survived from my shipment. I think all of my Tambopanesis died, and the only thing that survived is a Madeirae. And I think I have 2 or 3 others in that tank too, but they're very large now. They're like almost 3 inches. Yeah, I'm probably overestimating. Probably 2.25 to 2.5 inches long now. They're bigger than the Imperials are. The black belts. And they look like a black belt. They've got that black line. It doesn't go as far towards their gills as it does on the Imperials. They almost look like they're a combination of Imperial tetras and the Titiocharax, because they have markings that are very similar. And I'm sure that's just me talking out my butt, but they look like that. They look like they are a combination, of the two. I'm sure that they're just a species of their own. I really am jealous, Joseph. All right, guys. This is my first time back, so I'm going to cut this one short. This is right at 40 minutes. I am so overwhelmingly astounded, really, that so many of you have showed up to this live stream. I thank you. I want to you to know how much I appreciate that. I was expecting to talk to one or two people. Thank you, Laura. And right back at you when the time's needed. All right, guys. Joseph says he wants the fry to learn from the adults so they do not eat the fry of the F2 generation. Thanks, Terry. Thank you, Laura. And thank you, Candy. You guys mean a lot to me, and I will try my best to stay connected this time. Hopefully, knock on wood, we won't have any more of this rough reality check. All right, guys, I'm out. Thank you so much. And next week, I'll try to do a full hour, and I will be doing it on water. Water for someone who is new to the fish keeping hobby.